The government is still shut, and I will bring you up to date on that in a little bit. I've been reading up on the Hill. I think the Democrats may still be in a meeting talking to each other about when they're going to decide to reopen the government. Republicans are standing by, as Senator Majority Leader Thune has said. They'll have a vote. They'll stay all weekend, even though the Veterans Day week break is supposed to begin tomorrow. They'll keep the Republicans there if, in fact, the government will reopen. But the Democrats, got to get 10 Democrats to come over. Actually, 8 is all we need. 8 Democrats to come over to reopen the government. I'll bring you an update on that afterwards. But I want to begin the show not with the bad news about government dysfunction, but by saying I'm not going to be here tomorrow. Alex Marlowe is going to fill in for me. And I'm not going to be here Monday, which is the 250th birthday of the United States Marine Corps. Sorry, brother-in-law George, can't be here to salute the Marine Corps on Monday. And I don't know when I'm getting back, and I don't know if I'm actually leaving because the airlines are starting to cancel airplanes because of the government. I'm supposed to fly on Friday and on Sunday and on Tuesday, but I should be back on Tuesday for my annual Veterans Day show to celebrate America's veterans and thefund.org. And so I'm getting a little head start on that right now by talking to my guest on the phone, Major Ivan Castro, retired United States Army. Major Castro, did we get you on the phone?
I am here, Mr. Hewitt. Thank you for having me, and thank you for what you do, not only to keep us informed, but also for our veterans and our military men and women in uniform and their families.
I feel awfully silly having you thank me, Major. Let me give people a little bit of background on you, because it's so astonishing. Your service sheet here that I've got in front of me is just astonishing. You were wounded in combat in 2006, hit by a mortar round. You lost your sight. And you then continued to serve as one of 3 blind active duty officers in the Army for a decade. You retired from the Army in 2016, but what I find amazing, you're the only blind officer who served in the United States Army Special Forces. Before we get to your recovery and how the fund helped you out, thefund.org, what did you do for Special Forces after you lost your eyesight, Major?
Believe it or not, I worked recruiting men and women inside Special Forces. And also I provided support to the families of those that were injured, the service members, and really played an active role in supporting the men and women downrange by resupplying them with equipment and men and material that they needed. And even though a unit is deployed, there's still activities and functions, missions that need to be taking place by that unit back here in on post on the installation. So I wanted to deploy with the unit. Unfortunately, there was a mission that needed to be taking place back here, and I was very blessed to take up that role of supporting those that came back injured, those that came back deceased, supporting the family members and just helping the men and women that were back here.
That's remarkable, Major. I'm also told that you're quite a runner, and I'm going to get into that in a second. But I devote most of Tuesday's show. It's a live show. It's Veterans Day, but I'm in studio that day. I'll be talking to a lot of your friends and fellow service members who've been assisted by thefund.org over the last 20-odd years of war. How did the fund help you after you lost your eyesight?
It was by pure coincidence that I came across the Semper Fi Fund and America's Fund. It was by another veteran that told me about it. I was getting ready to compete in the national championships in the Paralympics for cycling, and my bike was a little bit outdated, and my friend said, you know what, there's a foundation that could probably help us bring this bike up to speed so we could be competitive on the road. And he told me about the Semper Fi Fund and America's Fund and made a phone call, provided with proper paperwork, and without a hesitation at all, they paid for those parts and labor. And then that was it. From there on, they've been with me and my family forever. They haven't lost track of me. And, my case manager, Beth Cooling, who is amazing, truly amazing. She answers the phone, and if not, you'll get a call immediately. And it's the little things, right, that goes a long ways. In Christmas, a wreath that goes on the door that every time I approach my door, it's a fresh wreath. I can smell it because I'm totally blind. It's a Christmas ornament that goes on the tree. It might be a gift card. It might be a meal for Thanksgiving. It's so many little things that will go a long way. It's a Christmas card. It's a card or a gift certificate for.
Well, I'm hoping everyone who's listening will tune in on Tuesday, because I got a half dozen service members like the Major who are going to give their testimony. But I got to find out about the National Paracycling Tandem Team. You're pretty extraordinary, Major. I should have known that because you were Special Forces when you lost your sight in Iraq. And I should have assumed that your recovery would include sort of excelling at something. But how does paracycling work? I know how blind runners run marathons. I've seen them. I've run alongside of them. They run with a partner. But how does paracycling work?
I'm in a tandem, so it's one bike with two seats. I have a captain up front or a pilot, and I'm what's called a stoker in the back. And so we're both working together. And just like in the military, work together in unison, right, to move forward.
What do you got? Thighs that are the size of, hammocks? Are they just giants?
My thighs?
Yeah.
Not regular thighs.
Okay.
Thighs.
How many miles a week do you cycle, Major?
I like to get at least each ride 60 miles every time I get on the bike. But when I can, it's sometimes hard to find a pilot. It's hard to find someone to get up front. But sometimes I need about 3 or 4 pilots in order to ensure a ride or two a week.
And you also have these marathons. How many marathons have you run since you lost your eyesight, Major?
I don't know. I really lost count. After I know it's over 50. I really lost count. I don't know. I got a bucket over there with all the medals, and I keep my bibs, my numbers, where I write in the back of it the date, the time, and who I ran it with, and what was significant about that race. But,
well, you're making us all feel like slugs, but I want to thank you for getting us in the mood for Veterans Day so that people know it's a holiday in many places and they don't really remember why. That's why we do the Veterans Show, the wars being over and everything. But, Major, I appreciate you're taking the time to join me today. I'm going to replay this on Tuesday and let everyone know about thefund.org. Do they always deliver, Major? We've got about a minute left here. Do they always deliver?
Always. They always deliver. They always, without a doubt, they're always there. And one thing I want to tell you, none of these accomplishments that I've done, the races, marathons, or the cycling, was done by myself. All along my life, I've had a team, someone by my side to guide me, help me. And Semper Fi Fund and America's Fund is still here for our veterans and their families. So they're there to help, to assist, to support, and to encourage, and they do it with pride, right, and with honor. And
Absolutely.
So I pledge my commitment to them, and they have a great board, a great staff, and I want them to continue on to serve not only the veterans now, but those who are coming behind me. And so I'm here for them.
I have no doubt that they will. You're one of 38,000 veterans they've served, and they have raised and invested in our veterans $350 million, and so we devote a lot of Tuesday's show to that, and I will be replaying your interview on Tuesday, and I just want to thank you again, Major. Have a great Veterans Day weekend. I hope we keep the government open, get the government open for people like you, and I appreciate your joining me today. Thank you. Remember, thefund.org is where you go to support the fund. It began as the Semper Fi Fund, then they started America's Fund, then they merged both of them. And twice a year for 20 years now, we devote all or most of a show to the fund. And I know we're coming up on the 250th birthday of the Marine Corps on Monday. I'm not going to be here on Monday, but Alex Marlowe will be sitting in for me. But I wanted to get in an early reminder of Prepare Tuesday to thank the veterans in your life for everything they've done for this country. When we come back, we'll find out if the Democrats have decided to do anything for the country today. President Trump had a gaggle in the Oval today where he bid adieu to former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, who announced her retirement today at the age of 85. Cut number 3.
The second time, the first time was, hang on.
I think she did the country a great service by retiring. I think she was a tremendous liability for the country. I thought she was an evil woman who did a poor job, who cost the country a lot in damages and in reputation. I thought she was terrible. Thank you.
What do you really think, Mr. President? Because that don't soften it up for us. Cut number 4, also in the Oval.
Obamacare is a disaster. The Obamacare premium is going to go up 17 or 18%, and that's not my fault. I didn't want Obamacare. That's the fault of the people that put it in, the Democrats. And now they want it subsidized further. But, where you take it from them, you take it from a lot of other people. We could have much better health care at a much lower price.
He's right about that, and Democrats have to get serious about that. But first, they have to open the government. Now, listen, you just heard Major Castro. I have no problems. I may be inconvenienced tomorrow. My audience may be inconvenienced who I'm supposed to speak to on Saturday. My audience may be inconvenienced who I'm supposed to speak to on Monday if the flights aren't working. Senator Cornyn's flight was canceled, so we lost him from the show today. You heard Senator Thune on the floor of the Senate today, cut number 11.
Mr. President, we are 37 days into an entirely avoidable government shutdown. And I say avoidable, Mr. President, because it was. Democrats instigated this shutdown by rejecting a clean, nonpartisan funding resolution. Republicans weren't asking them to swallow a bunch of new conservative policies. There isn't a single partisan policy in the bill. And yet Democrats couldn't bring themselves to take yes for an answer. Democrats, of course, have claimed their decision to shut down the government's about health care. They want Republicans to bail out their Obamacare mess. And
the president is right, and the Democrats know that they're wrong, and they've increasingly got a split in their caucus. I don't know if the meeting is broken up yet. They've been meeting for hours today because people like John Fetterman and Angus King and Cortez Masto, the senator from Nevada, have been saying, what are you, nuts? Are you people nuts? We are causing families that need food from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program to go to food banks, and they're empty. And because the demand is so hard. This is hundreds of thousands of people in every state, millions of people nationwide. I think 42 million people need SNAP benefits, food assistance, and the Democrats have cut them off. Now the air traffic controllers are just saying, nope, we're not doing it anymore. We've missed 2 paychecks, and they're calling in sick. And as a result, we're reducing air traffic, and flights are being canceled across the country. But you know who's really getting screwed? People who haven't been paid for 2 pay periods can't make mortgages, can't make rent, can't pay their credit card. And you know what happens? Even though they get paid, they'll get back pay, they're going to get credit card dings. This is the longest federal shutdown in history for nothing. Democrats did it as an election stunt. Maybe it worked. It's blue states. I don't know. They got Mamdani, and they're now led by, I heard Speaker Johnson say today, the leader of the Democrats is now a Marxist, and an anti-Semitic Marxist at that. It is genuinely unbelievable what the Democrats are doing now, and the House doesn't have to come back because there's nothing for them to do until the Senate passes something. And so the Senate now needs to come up with a new CR and some of the appropriations bills, and the Democrats have to decide to offer something to the Republicans that the Republicans will reject if it's other than the straight funding and the actual regular order appropriations bill. It's kind of a nightmare. I can't believe Democrats are doing this to themselves, but everyone who's getting screwed by it, remember, Chuck Schumer shutdown, the Schumer shutdown. Let me tell you about andrewandtodd.com. I don't know what the markets are doing today. The interest rates have been creeping up because people who buy American treasuries are demanding higher rates of interest because confidence in the federal government is getting lower and lower. But Union Home Mortgage is a bank. andrewandtodd.com, 888-888-1172, great sponsors of my program and have been for years. They're great lenders. They originate the loan. They talk to you over the phone, 888-888-1172, or you can fill out part of the application for a mortgage at andrewandtodd.com. They'll counsel you on what's best for you, 15, 20, 30 year. Maybe you need a refinance. Maybe you need a reverse mortgage. You're a senior, 62 years and older, and the budget is tight after the Biden inflation, which has come down to 3%, but it's still, it's not going backwards. We're not having deflation. All those price hikes that Joe Biden wished upon you with his reckless spending for 4 years, they're still there. Although it's coming down in some places. Before I remind you of Andrew and Todd again, what did the president say today in the Oval about Thanksgiving? Cut number 5.
They just came out with a very powerful statement. They've done it for many years, that under the Biden administration, a Thanksgiving meal with all the trimmings cost 25% more. In other words, our Thanksgiving this year coming up will cost 25% less than sleepy Joe Biden's. Now, to me, that's better than anything there is. That's better than a poll. They've got everything included, from the trimmings and from the turkey and from everything, a lot of different items. It's 25% less this year than it was last year when he was so-called in charge. He wasn't in charge. The people around the desk were in charge. The auto pen was in charge. That is a big factor.
That's the Walmart number, and it is a big number. 25% for the Thanksgiving dinner. They do it every year with all the turkey and the cranberry sauce and the stuffing and everything else that you have, mashed potatoes. I don't know what they include in it, but they keep the metric constant year over year, down 25% year over year. That's fabulous. I don't know why turkey is so much cheaper than it was, but that's really good. Back to andrewandtodd.com. Mortgages have come down a little bit. They need to come down a lot more. The president is working on that by jawboning the Fed, but the Fed doesn't have any data because the government is shut, so they don't know whether or not inflation has gone down or up. They don't know how to forecast. Thank you, Democrats. But Andrew and Todd will give you the best counseling possible, and if it's not time to get into a mortgage, they'll tell you. But if you're a veteran, you don't want to put any money down, andrewandtodd.com. You're a first-time home buyer and you don't know what you're doing, maybe FHA makes sense for you, andrewandtodd.com. Everything you need, 888-888-1172. I need my relief factor because I am still immobile. And by that I mean my back is still out. I'm never, ever carrying Tree Stump Teddy is his new nickname because he's solid. He's a solid 3-year-old. And I'm never doing that again because I know what happens as a result. I don't move for 4 days. But I got my relief factor. I've been taking it twice a day for this week, and I'm hoping that by the time I'm sitting in the airport lounge tomorrow, Alex Marlowe sitting in for me, things will have begun to ease. Woke the fetching Mr. Hewitt up this morning when I tried to stand up, and I actually let out sort of a sharp, that really hurts. And that was not well received by the fetching Mr. Hewitt. But if you call 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, you can get started for $19.95, 3-week starter pack, $19.95. Or go to their website, relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. I have got no problems. I've talked to Major Ivan earlier, Castro, so I have no problems. But I must tell you, I have inconveniences. And the Democrats are inconveniencing me a great deal already because of the complication in getting anyone at any airline to tell you what is happening because they don't know which flights are going to fly tomorrow. And I got an event on Saturday and an event on Monday. Alex Marlowe, thank you for filling in for me tomorrow, preemptory. I'm not going to be here Monday either as I make the, who knows where I'll be, lost in America because of the Democrats. They won! Take the W. They won, they got a communist anti-Semite in New York. They've got bland vanilla governors in New Jersey and Virginia. They got Prop 50 redistricting wars underway in California. They won. No Republicans are very upset about that, by the way, because they didn't really have. The only thing that disappoints me is that Virginia voted in a nut as the Attorney General, the guy who's wishing death on his opponents. But other than that, hard to figure out what the Democrats think they are doing right now, because the Republicans are never going to reward this behavior, and they aren't going to spend $1.5 trillion on Obamacare. It's broken. It's beyond repair, and we can't pay for it without reigniting the Biden inflation. And you hear how affordability is actually on everyone's mind in the exit polls. That's the inflation that we're living with because of Joe Biden and the people around Joe Biden. But I do want to play for you what the president had to say about the tariff case. Now, I don't agree with this, but this is what he said in the Oval a couple hours ago, cut number 6.
This is the best one. And we can do other things, but they're slow by comparison. Like as an example, with the 100%, I was able to do it instantaneously when we were threatened by the rare earths, as you know, the magnets. And I did it instantaneously. It was a matter of seconds. And it was a matter of seconds that I got a phone call, let's work this out. We would have had not nearly the defense that we had. It would be a shame. It would be somewhat catastrophic for our country, I have to be honest with you. I don't want to get too much involved, but what we've done, we're taking in hundreds of trillions of dollars. If you take a look at the numbers we're at $17 trillion right now. We're going to be at $21 trillion, about $21 trillion by the time I've finished my first year. Biden, as an example, the Biden administration was at less than $1 trillion for 4 years. We're going to be at $21 trillion for 1 year. In the history of the world, there's never been a country that's done that. Not China, not the U.S., not anybody. And a lot of that is because of the tariffs and the fact that the president is a competent president that knows how to use them. And I use them for national
I think he's
defense.
talking about GDP. I don't know, but I don't think, and I think his advisors ought to tell him this, you can't jawbone the court. The court is going to ease out of the tariff power somehow. They're going to put guardrails around it, but they're not going to end the Trump tariffs, I don't think, overnight. I think they're going to remand it and say, okay, let's find out which ones are national security based and which ones are not, and let's develop some standards, because the president can't have unlimited authority to do this. And that was pretty clear from the oral argument yesterday. Most observers agree it was a very hostile court to the argument being put forward by the government of unlimited power to use tariffs in a immediate way, instantaneous way, in the absence of criteria for an emergency that are replicable and able to define, but we'll find out. I want to get to the fat drugs, because the president talked about it today. Now, you might decide not to do myphdweightloss.com after you hear what the president said today. 864
644
1900. That's
864
644
1900. I'll play your game, you rogue.
Yeah, myphdweightloss.com is the way. Dwayne lost 50 pounds, gained back 15, going to lose it again before Christmas. And myphdweightloss.com works. But here's what the president said about the fat drugs today. Cut number 1.
Here he is, as we promised, President Trump.
200%, 300%, 500%, 700%, a little bit more than that. So today I'm thrilled to announce that the 2 world's largest pharmaceutical manufacturers, Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk, have agreed to offer their most popular GLP-1 weight loss drug. I call it the fat drug, remember? At drastic discounts, a very effective
Drastic discounts, but generalissimo, we don't want to pay for our life, right? You don't have to pay for the rest of your
Well,
life.
it's not the cost. It's the fact that you have to stay on that shot forever for it to keep working.
That's why we want you to use myphdweightloss.com. 864
644
1900, or go to myphdweightloss.com. Don't take the shot every day for the rest of your life. 864-644-1900. Speaker Johnson gave a great press conference today. Now, there's spin and there's framing. Spin is what you do, and there's good spin and there's bad spin. There's a spectrum of spin. And good spin is where you make a good story better or you make a bad story less terrible. But framing is different from spin. Framing is where you set up how the audience that you're addressing ought to think about the issue that you're discussing. Here's Speaker Johnson framing what's ahead in New York City today, cut number 8.
We pointed out that other major metropolitan areas in the country are facing the same threat with candidates similar to Mamdani. And we're going to continue to call out their effort to mainstream and normalize socialism and Marxism in America. Working families watching this play out have a right to know that socialism and communism are not just confined in New York City. They are quickly coming to a town near you unless you stand up and let your voice of common sense be heard. While Democrats hitch their wagon to the socialist
President
agenda,
made the same direct message last night with Brett Baer, cut number 7.
This one we're going to look. For 1,000 years, communism has not worked. Communism or the concept of communism has not worked. I tend to doubt it's going to work this time.
It's going to work. I cannot wait to see. I posted on my X account today. I hope some of the digital geniuses over at the RNC, and they have a good team, are following Comrade Mamdani and his transition and who he's hiring, and when the supermarkets, the government supermarkets open up, and that they get the real accounting through FOIA, and that they find out where the free buses are running and how that's going, and where's the money coming from. It never works, right? Communism has never worked. Other people's money is spent blindly and willfully on waste, fraud. It's almost impossible to avoid corruption with communism because the state is in charge of everything, and we'll see what Comrade Mamdani comes up with. It's going to be a nightmare. Meanwhile, Democrats still meeting, still haven't opened up the government. Speaker Johnson, House presser, cut number 9.
Yes. The reason we're so enthusiastic about running next year is we have a real record to run on. Mamdani and Democrats want to talk about affordability? We love that subject. We love it. Look at the facts. I brought some this morning. It's the Republicans who are working every day to make life more affordable for working families. And it's not a talking point for us. We are delivering. After 4 long years of skyrocketing prices under the Biden administration, we had to take over. You don't flip a switch and reverse that overnight. It takes a while to work those policies out of the system and to get the new ones in. President Trump and Republicans are delivering results for the American people that they can see and feel.
Now, that's the Thanksgiving dinner metric. I love that metric because everyone knows what goes into it costs 25% less. So if you spent $100 on Thanksgiving last year, you only have to spend $75 for the same meal this year. That's the Trumponomics kicking in. It'll be better next year. Look at your gas ticket. The more oil and gas we produce because of Doug Burgum in the Department of Interior and Chris Wright in the Department of Energy and the congressional, the One Big Beautiful Bill and the easing of oil and natural gas production rules, that is great. I do want to save you some money immediately, though. One of my sponsors is Consumer Cellular. And if you are at all aware of what you're spending on your cell phone data, you're different from most Americans. Most Americans sign up and forget it. They buy a unlimited data plan. They have no idea what it's costing them right now. I wish you would go and get your phone bill because then you would switch to Consumer Cellular. ConsumerCellular.com/Hugh. ConsumerCellular.com/Hugh. Call 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. If you're 50 years and older, all right, especially if you're 50 years and older, they have a special deal for you. 2 lines, right, 2 different numbers. And you can keep your old numbers, you can keep your old data, et cetera. It's very easy to switch your phone. It takes about 20 minutes over. 2 lines, $60 a month, unlimited data. Now, most of you don't need, if you're 50 years and older, unlimited data. You're not playing video games and watching endless movies on your iPhone. You need 5 gigs, 10 gigs. They got plans, all different price ranges. But you won't find out about savings without sacrifice until you call Consumer Cellular or go to consumercellular.com/Hugh or call them at 1-800-411-4454. Whether you go online or whether you call, remember my code is Hugh25. Get an additional $5 off for each of your first 5 months for another $25 in savings. But speaking about what the Democrats are doing, Steve Scalise, House Majority Leader, stepped to the mic after the Speaker stepped back, cut number 10.
You heard Senator Murphy yesterday, quote, "I think we're in an enormously strong position right now." Strong position? What's so strong about taking food out of the mouths of 42 American families? What is strong about that, Senator? Sure, you can vote again today to keep the government shut down, but there's nothing strong about denying food to people who are low income and who can't afford it. That's a weak place to be.
You know, he's not
That's
using
what they're
a
bragging
teleprompter.
about.
He's actually pretty angry. He said 42 million Americans, but he's not using a teleprompter. By the way, going to get worse at the airport. Here's Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy on Fox News, cut number 12.
They missed a partial payment in early October. They missed a full payment a week and a half ago. This morning, they're getting their pay stubs that they're going to get another big fat zero, no paycheck for the second time. They've all told me it's really hard to navigate a full month of no pay, missing 2 pay periods. So I think you're going to have more significant disruptions in the airspace. And as we come into Thanksgiving, if we're still in the shutdown posture, it's going to be rough out there, really rough. And we'll mitigate the safety side, but will you fly on time? Will your flight actually go? That is yet to be seen, but there'll be more disruption. So yeah, would I still book? If there's deals out there, I'd book my flight. I'm flying my kids home from school, Lawrence. I booked those flights last night. Of course, I'm going to book them. But again, we're going to have to all work together as the American people to navigate this really not great situation that I think Democrats in the Senate are putting on the American people with the shutdown.
You know, the idea that people are going hungry is a intellectual one, unless you are going hungry. Flight disasters is immediate for millions of Americans right away. And they're going to know that they're screwed because of the Democrats. That messaging they will never forget. They'll have a story to tell forever about what happened to them beginning tomorrow, going on through the rest of the Democrat Schumer shutdown. There are some rumblings that maybe the Democrats have figured out this is backfiring. There are some rumblings they're about to break their sword over their knee and ask for some kind of safe-saving device. Some rumblings that Senator Thune is going to tee up a vote tomorrow and keep the Senate here over the weekend, which I don't know if that will get the air traffic controllers to come in tomorrow, so I don't know if I'm going to be flying or not tomorrow. I'm not supposed to be here tomorrow. Alex Marlowe is sitting in for me because I'm supposed to be in the air, and then Monday as well, Alex will be here. I'll be back for Veterans Day program on Tuesday, of course, but we'll keep updating that. I'll check on all of our sources over the top of the hour break. Let me take a moment, though, to look ahead to December 2nd and 3rd. I'm going to be in Fort Worth, Texas, along with Dwayne, broadcasting from the American Legislative Exchange Council winter meeting. And it's going to be a lot of fun. 1,000 state legislators are coming together, and I'm going to thump the table. It drives Dwayne crazy when I do that. Thump the table in order to find out who is doing the redistricting. I heard the speaker today giving a press conference saying there are 12 or 13 seats that Democrats are in that Donald Trump won. So those are target seats. And there are only 3 Republicans in districts that Kamala Harris won. So that means there are about 10 competitive seats in the United States right out of the back. He also said between 6 and 8 seats at the end of the day after all the redistricting by California and Texas, and I hope Florida, and I hope Indiana, and I hope Missouri. When it's all done, he expects to pick up another 6 to 8. I hope that's great. But we'll talk about it at the American Legislative Exchange Council meeting. And if you want to go, tickets are available to watch the live broadcast, talk to the legislators, get a chance to meet everyone. All you have to do is go to alec.org/U, ALEC.org/U. And I always love these things because it's wonkery at its finest, and these are really smart people working on very important issues at the state level. You get 1,000, I just talked state public policy, because ALEC is nonpartisan. If there are Democrats there, we'll talk about what they're working on, if they're for school choice or they're for anything that makes sense at the state level. But I am going to hammer everyone about redistricting and redistrict again. All right? redistrict and redistrict again. Here at home, I don't think Big Pharma is going to score a win, but make sure you go to pharmawindfall.com to make sure that they don't. That is put together by Conservatives for Lower Healthcare Costs.com. Conservatives for Lower Healthcare Costs.com, pharmawindfall.com. We do not want any deal done through regular order. We're not talking about the CR. The Republicans are not going to cave, but through the appropriations process, Big Pharma is there saying, help us, Obamacare is horrible. Well, they sold us down the river. Big Pharma did when Obamacare came down the pike in 2011. And Big Pharma got a windfall then. Then they got a windfall that they needed for Operation Warp Speed, which worked good on them, but not again. No more money, no more handouts for Big Pharma. Visit pharmawindfall.com, put up by Conservatives for Lower Healthcare Costs. Good sponsor of the program, and we love them because we don't love pharma lobbyists. Amid rumors that the government may get a chance to reopen tomorrow, we're still waiting for confirmation from anyone in the Senate. I'm joined by John Ellis, editor-in-chief and founder of News Items. I read news items first thing every morning. Usually, if you follow me on X, see me post one or two things from the 15 to 20 different things that John Ellis and his team put together every morning. But John, I'm glad you could join me because I'm not here tomorrow, and I wanted to talk to you about the elections, and I want to start in Manhattan because I kind of expected Virginia to go blue, not by the margin that it did, but I did not expect Mr. Mamdani to get a absolute majority. So Comrade Mamdani, he thinks he's got a mandate, does he?
I think the mandate fallacy is sort of a disease that infects a lot of politicians, but Mamdani seems to have a particularly bad case. He got 50.4% of the vote, and he said that would enable him to enact or, execute his his mandate, and in fact the opposite is true. And it's an interesting comparison because Abigail Spanberger got 57% of the vote. All of the Democratic candidates in Virginia, statewide candidates, won, and they picked up 10 seats in the state assembly. So you would say, now that's something of a mandate. And her response to that was, we're going to be very cautious. So you have one person who barely got a majority saying, I have a mandate to do whatever I want. You have another person who actually got a mandate and said, I'm going to proceed with caution. It's a perfect comparison.
Now, John Ellis, you and I have been watching this for a long time. I've never seen anyone as radical as Comrade Mamdani get executive authority, and there are 300,000 people who work for them. I'm hoping the RNC has a 24/7, 365 watch on his initiatives, especially the government-run grocery stores. How badly do you think this could go?
I think that the major concern is the police force. If you have a mayor who has endorsed the idea of defunding the police force may take exception to that. And the bigger it's the opportunity for first-class officers in the police department to find better work has opened up because so much corporate security is now in demand. So if you're a really good cop and you work in Queens and you worked there for 20 years, haven't quite reached retirement, there are corporate security firms that are coming to poach. And if you have a mayor who is in favor of defunding the police, you probably take that job, which is also probably better paying than the job you have. That's the big concern, is public safety and the loss of. We've already seen 500 resignations in the police department, and
wow.
I'm hoping that, I mean, not today, but over the last 6 months, I'm hoping that the police commissioner, Jessica Tisch, who's a world-class police commissioner, can hold her best officers, to the force. But if we lose those people, then we have a very serious issue. And for those of us who are in and out of New York all the time, it's sort of terrifying.
John, I got to ask you about New Yorkers who can move. 1% of New York City residents pay 48% of the income taxes, the personal income taxes. Do you think they're going to stick around if the city starts to slow down, if not deteriorate rapidly?
I don't know about that. I mean, the Midtown real estate market is through the roof at the moment, where it had been essentially dead after the pandemic. And it's very hard to convince, J.P. Morgan Chase, which just built this huge office building on 47th and Park, the idea that they're going to pack up and move to Dallas or to Florida, that's not going to happen. But the question is, where will we be a year from now or a year and a half from now? If public safety is a huge issue, if the Mamdani administration has gone off the rails and the city, is sort of reached Dinkin era dishevelment, then I think you'll begin to see some exodus. The problem, that's not a problem, but New York City is attractive precisely because everybody else is in New York City, so to speak. So if you're an investment banker, a hedge fund manager, somebody in the tech industry, those people, your peers, are here. So the likelihood is we won't see an exodus immediately, but if things turn really for the bad, then an exodus will occur, I think.
All right, now I want to turn to the Trump effect. Speaker Johnson gave a press conference today. I was watching it. I was in the Fox screen room, and it went long, so I never actually got to say it. I think Mike Johnson is framing this correctly, but he's very optimistic publicly, as he has to be as a speaker, and he's got actually the best of both Paul Ryan and Kevin McCarthy in that he's very good with the framing, but I think he is not being candid about the Trump effect. If Trump's not on the ballot, the Republicans have a problem, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the results, Trump does very well Trump did very well in exurban and rural communities. A really juiced turnout there, not just in 2024, but in 2020 and again in 2016. And if you look at the election results by county in those exurban and rural counties, the vote was down significantly. So with Trump not on the ballot, the Republican vote, so to speak, writ large, is less. And I don't think it would have made any difference in New Jersey or Virginia, but the margins would have been slimmer. And obviously, looking ahead, Trump is not on the ballot again. So that's something that the Republicans are going to have to worry about and think about.
They're going to have to hope that he's out there on the stump. Now, you've also watched a lot of elections. Does a president campaigning hard matter in a midterm election?
Depends on where the president is, obviously. If the president has a high favorable rating, then it's obviously a positive. But what a president does, particularly in Trump's case, is he gets out voters whose sort of political commitment, if you will, is to Trump. So if Trump gets out and says, "You got to vote. I'm asking you for it. Please do it." That's going to juice turnout a little bit. The interesting thing about the midterms was that Trump did none of that in person in California, Virginia, and New Jersey. They may have sensed that they were going to lose there, so they didn't want to put him in a losing situation. But I think that was part of the reason that the turnout of the, quote, Trump voters, end quote, was diminished.
That was my tell. When he did not show up in person in New Jersey, my optimism about Jack Ciattarelli faded. Let me close by talking about the hiring freeze and whether or not corporate America has finally ended it. News Items covers hiring better than anybody, and I like to see what the stories are about that. Overall, is America hiring again?
No. There are three things. The big three are the tariffs. The corporations have eaten about 2/3 of the tariff costs, so they have to cut on the spending side, and that means layoffs. Second is robotics is beginning to really affect employment in factories and warehouses. Amazon expects that it will take its workforce from, I think it's 1.4 million to 1 million because of robotics. So that's a big deal. And the third thing, which is is a real problem, is that AI, once AI is sort of applied specifically to the legal profession, the accounting profession, the insurance agency profession, you're going to see, cuts in the employment there of 5% or 10% or even 15 or 20%. And that's inexorable. That's not going to stop at some point. That's going to get more and more pronounced. So as AI takes jobs, and those are white-collar jobs in the main that they'll be taking, that's another thing to worry about for sure.
Quick comment from, I went to Bob Barnett's memorial service this week, sitting next to a publishing guy, and he said, the one thing I tell my kids is AI can't replace creatives. They go into the arts, go into theater, go into music, go into stuff like, do you agree with that? Because I kind of thought, well, that might be true for live performance, but I'm not sure it's true about music.
Well, my son is a talent agent in the music industry, and what I told him to do was to figure out how to use AI to augment and improve and perhaps create music that people will, listen to. And I think that, the Kanye West, or whatever his name is these days, is at the forefront of this, using AI to make music. There's going to be a lot more of that. We'll see.
Fewer artists then, more music, fewer artists. John Ellis, always follow him on X at Ellis Items and subscribe to News Items. Just Google News Items and John Ellis, and you'll get there and you'll be smart every morning by 7:30. Thank you, John. Let me read you from thehill.com. Senate Majority Leader John Thune is set to hold a vote on Friday with an eye towards ending the government shutdown. The GOP leaders told lawmakers over a conference lunch that he will hold another vote on the House-passed continuing resolution that has failed to advance 14 times so far. This time, however, Thune is putting it on the floor with an eye towards amending it to attach a 3-bill spending package known as a minibus that has been part of the negotiations with the Democrats, one Senate GOP aide said. The bill would also include a new end date for sometime in January, rather than the November 21st date already included in the House-passed measure. At the center of the bipartisan vote negotiation, there's been a vote on expiring Affordable Care Act subsidies. It is unclear what that commitment is or when the vote would look like. It's not going to pass. The package is expected to take days to clear due to objections potentially on both sides of the aisle. We'll find out how serious the Democrats are or not, Senator John Kennedy said after lunch. Whether enough Democrats jump on board to advance the measure is a real question, though. They were mum on how they would proceed following a lengthy caucus lunch on Thursday. Numerous Senate Democrats told reporters that the party was unified, but declined to say what they were unified behind. Some indicated it was a continuation of their status quo posture. Quote, it was a great discussion and we're unified that we have to bring down health care costs, said Senator Tammy Baldwin, Democrat of Wisconsin. Senator Mark Kelly, Democrat of Arizona, said, it's the best meeting we've had. Why? Because it was very productive to getting us in the same direction. They're hopelessly conflicted and confused, but the detail there about there should be 12 appropriations bills passed every year by September 30th. Republicans are prepared to move a half dozen of them in regular order and pass a CR for the rest of them to get them done. We're better off than we've been in a long, long time. Democrats don't want to reward good behavior with yes votes, so they shut the government down. And they had an election to juice turnout for, and they think they did that. I think they got a false positive there, which is a very dangerous thing in politics. But they got what they wanted. John Fetterman gave a Senate gaggle and said this earlier today, cut number 13.
World Kitchen's feeding government workers in my neighborhood in Navy Yard. I mean, it's really impacting these folks. It's like, we've all been paid, but all these workers haven't been paid. The Capitol Police that are protecting here haven't been paid. Our military, why? That's not controversial. Pay our military. Pay all these folks. And now make sure everyone's fed now. Why would we put ourselves in that situation at this point? We've had the election. Now we can all reopen and now find a way forward now.
Are you saying it was about the election, that was a role? You said now we've had the election, we can move forward. Are you suggesting
I'm sorry, what's that?
I said, are you suggesting that the election had something to do with the calculus on the Democratic side.
It played no role in my
But what
views,
about
but
your
maybe
colleagues?
this, I don't know, it's possible, but I haven't talked to anyone to find out what their real motivations are.
Senator, can you spend a few words on those elections? Support invoking the nuclear option on the filibuster?
On the filibuster? I mean, I'm not afraid of. I'm afraid of that. Right now, they said there's no even any votes, but Democrats really can't freak out because we all wanted to eliminate the entire filibuster. It was just a couple of years about that. So, I mean, they have a thing called the internet. You know, you could just look up and confirm. We all wanted to wreck the filibuster.
Senator, what's your...
John Fetterman is growing on me. Can't grow much bigger because he's a big man. I met him for the first time a couple of weeks ago. He is a big man. You know what a big idea is? BestHotGrill.com. You might want to get a great sponsor of mine, have been for years, sponsor of Dwayne's World as well, great podcast. You'll see him on a lot of the Salem programs and a lot of the Salem podcasts because Best Hot Grill appeals to the discerning customer, the ones who want the very best grill in America. That's the Solaire Infrared Grill. That's the BestHotGrill.com. Now, they also sell Rasmussen fireballs, and that's for your fireplace. They also sell Rasmussen logs. That's for your fireplace. But the fireballs are very, very popular, and you can get a free personalized log set sizing. All you have to do is go to besthotgrill.com and ask for it. But when you're there, start thinking about the fact, holiday season, you buy presents for your best clients. Look at, if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, there are 5 different models of Solaire Infrared Grill, from the hibachi, the small one, to the mother of all grills at the other end. That one you want to try it before you buy it. That's a program besthotgrill.com offers. But a lot of you are thinking, how do I get a gift that my clients are really going to appreciate, really going to use, not a fruitcake, absolutely something that they're going to love? It's the Solaire Infrared Hibachi, the Best Hot Grill small version or the next smallest version. Either are portable. They can take it with them to every tailgate. They'll always be thinking about you. BestHotGrill.com. Final sponsor in the segment that I do want to mention before we move on to next segment, we're going to talk about oil and gas production in the United States. I want to remind you of Americans for Free Markets. That's Americans for Free Markets, and their website is forfreemarkets.com. F-O-R, freemarkets.com. Steelers fans, F-O-R, freemarkets.com, forfreemarkets.com. That is the website to make sure that debanking is debunked and done. Never going to come back. President Trump signed an executive order in August banning debanking by any federal regulator, obliging banks to shut down disfavored conservative causes or actually liberal causes. We don't want the financial system involved in politics. We want people to be able to bank without alleged reputational damage and other made-up left-wing reasons to debank conservatives, make it hard for conservatives to actually have bank accounts and do financial trading systems. And you know, it's hard to believe that actually was going on, but it was. It's been proven up mostly against gun groups, though there are a few other instances. I think maybe some of my friends in the Christian legal defense world got hammered, but I'm not sure if Alliance Defending Freedom was among them or not. But the key was the gun groups got debanked, and they got debanked under pressure from regulators on banks. That's over now, but we need legislation to make sure it stays over. That's why we want you to go to forfreemarkets.com. If you're a gun owner and a gun enthusiast, you especially want to go to forfreemarkets.com because they are the ones with the big target around them. Forfreemarkets.com. Finally, let me take my relief factor. Why? Because I can't move. I haven't been able to move very well at all, and that's going to continue until this kicks in, and it has been kicking in a little bit, but we went a little bit backwards this morning when I made a bad move quickly. And relief factor, I've gotten 2 miles in after I've managed to loosen up the back and don't go, I'm not trundling. I'm just trying to move a little bit to try and get it going. Relief factor is helping. And you know, I can't take NSAIDs. No Aleve for me, no NSAIDs for me. So I take relief factor and I double down when I've done this. I've only done it twice in, I think, about 10 years. But when it has happened earlier this year, the great book moving crisis, This is worse. Teddy Tree Stump made it worse, but Relief Factor works. Call 1-800-4 and the word relief. Get their starter pack for $19.95 or their website, relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Last week I was all amped up to talk to Ann Bradbury, CEO of the American Exploration and Production Council, about what AXPC.org does and what Longer Laterals is. That's a podcast. And then I was ready and my denial of service attack happened and I was blanked out. So Dwayne stepped in to talk to Ann Bradbury and I said, that's not good enough. I want to brag to Ann. So she's back. Ann, good to see you again. Sorry about last week. The hamster died on us, but we got through that. And I am so glad to see you. And I want to tell you about that day, the night before that day, I was with Energy Secretary Chris Wright and I stunned him by talking to him about longer laterals.
Love that.
And I know. Tell people about Longer Laterals.
Yeah, so Longer Laterals is a new podcast that AXPC just kicked off. So the name refers to the horizontal drilling that U.S. energy producers are going miles under the surface to produce more energy with less. It's a key part of American energy dominance. And our podcast is bringing energy executives, energy CEOs who are doing these incredible technological innovations, producing the energy America needs, and talking about their story, their innovative companies, and how what's happening in Washington impacts their companies. So it's where America's energy industry meets Washington.
Now, Ann Bradbury and I had lunch a couple of weeks ago, and it was really geek out time because we both love to talk about permitting reform. So, Ann, what's the package look like, and who's behind it on the Hill? Who are your sponsors?
Yep. So on the House side, there's a great bill called the SPEED Act that's being worked on by Bruce Westerman, who's the chair of the Natural Resources Committee, and Jared Golden, a Democrat from Maine. And it has some really important reforms to NEPA, which you're well aware of, to both the NEPA process, but also to NEPA litigation. So we're incredibly supportive of the SPEED Act and would love for that to move once Congress gets up and running again. And then on the Senate side, there's some really important conversations happening around transmission, pipelines, Clean Water Act, and federal lands development that we're really very supportive of as well.
Do people understand? Now, I've got a lot of stations in New England, from Connecticut and Massachusetts all the way up to Maine. Do they understand that their energy costs are in part the responsibility of the state of New York standing in the way of pipeline construction?
Yeah, I think more and more people are starting to understand this. The fact is that energy prices for New Englanders in Maine, electricity prices went up 35% just last year. That is happening in large part because they can't get adequate supplies of natural gas and natural gas generation, despite the fact that they are just a couple hundred miles from one of the largest natural gas fields in the world. But states like New York are weaponizing the Clean Water Act to prevent the building of pipelines to get this critical, affordable, reliable energy to the places that need it most.
And what is their reason, Ann Bradbury? AXPC.org must spend some time talking to New Yorkers. Do they want to hurt? I mean, is it like they don't want anyone to beat the Giants, or they hate the Patriots? Why is it that New York does not want pipelines?
You know, I think there's certainly a legacy of an anti-fossil fuel movement out there. But what we see in our polling, as well as in Congress, is that there is broad bipartisan public support for natural gas infrastructure. But there's just some fringes some activists that are actively trying to prevent any new infrastructure from being built.
Now, if there was one project that you could attach as a writer to a bill, would it be that pipeline to New England? Because I do spend a lot of time in New England in the summer, and everyone complains about energy costs. And then you explain to me part of the reason they can't get natural gas from Pittsburgh and the area around that natural gas field. Is there one bill that might fix that?
So that would certainly be a project that I think is critical to millions of Americans in the Northeast. Absolutely. And so that would certainly be on a list of like high priority projects. I think the idea is that we need comprehensive permitting reform to fix the process, to ensure that these environmental statutes aren't weaponized like the Clean Water Act, like NEPA, to stop all forms of energy production and instead maintain high environmental protections, which we all want, but aren't weaponized in a way that's totally contrary to the original intent.
Now, I want to end by saying to everyone out there, remember longer laterals, because you really ought to understand why your energy costs are going up. And it's because we're not producing enough and we're not moving enough of the oil and natural gas that we have right here in the good old USA. And Ann Bradbury and her team at axpc.org are doing a great job pushing permitting reform. I love them as a sponsor. And I love Longer Laterals as actually a substantive podcast that you learn from. And thank you. And I pardon us for our data interruption last week when Dwayne filled in for me. I'm glad you could come back. Josh Kraushaar is editor-in-chief of Jewish Insider. Josh, got a lot to talk to you about, but first, the Abraham Accords is about to get a new signee, Kazakhstan. Is that a big deal or is that a symbolic deal?
I think it's a little more symbolic. The big Saudi Arabia, whose leader will be visiting the White House in the next couple weeks, that there'll be some momentum in that direction. Look, any momentum is good momentum. Any normalization of ties with countries that have not had those is a positive sign. But look, the big key is Saudi Arabia, and that still is very much.
Now, before I turn, Josh, to Comrade Mamdani and your reaction to New York, I've been seeing little bits of stories here and there about Lebanon getting hammered by the IDF and the possibility of a major escalation because Hezbollah is attempting to reconstitute. Have you been following that story, or is that alarmist?
It's not alarmist. There's activity actually today against in southern, but I think the big picture is that Hezbollah has been badly degraded where things were 7th, but there's still a presence. There's still questions about the stability of the arrangements made in recent diplomacy. I mean, look, Israel is still the Hezbollah is still they're much than they were 2 years ago, but it is something that the Israeli leadership is still keeping a close eye on.
All right, now let's turn to Comrade Mamdani. Obviously, as Mike Johnson said today, the Speaker of the House said he's an anti-Semite and he's a communist. I agree with that opinion. What do your readers think?
Well, you can look at the Jewish vote in New York City, and look at the exit polls, look at some of the by precinct data. About 2/3 of the Jewish vote in New York City voted for Andrew Cuomo, and there's never been such a disconnect between New York City is the large side outside of Israel, the largest home of Jews in the world, the diaspora. And to have someone who's that virulently anti-Israel as mayor has been alarming. Hugh, you don't hear rabbis from across different denominations, different ideological backgrounds, speaking out against Mamdani as much as you did in the 2 or 3 weeks before the election. That shows how alarmed, how concerned New York Jews are about how Mamdani is going to. It's really less about Israel, frankly. It's more about the safety and security of Jews in New York and across the country. But in the case of New York, Mamdani's ability to continue to fund the NYPD, protect Jews who have dealt with a rising tide of anti-Semitism, streets of New York City, and there's a lot of fear out there in New York among Jews about how Mamdani is going to govern and whether he's going to, be a threat. And we actually published a story, Hugh, in Jewish Insider today about the different areas where there are worries about what Mamdani can do policy-wise that could threaten the safety and security of the Jewish community.
And I want to close, Josh, by asking, have you followed the story of the terrorists who were plotting a Halloween attack in Detroit and nearby Cedar Point on LGBTQ clubs and an amusement park, and the FBI broke out? It doesn't get any national press at all, but it's very alarming.
Yeah, it is. The FBI announced that raid that happened for Halloween. There've been the disturbing, and heard a whole lot more what was originally reported and released by Kash Patel and the FBI. But something that we to do is watch the headlines of the news. There are constant. There's a need to be constantly vigilant against these types of Islamic extremist threats, and that was one of the latest ones in Michigan.
Was it self-radicalization of Americans, or was it immigrants to the United States who brought their extremism with them?
Hugh, to be honest, I haven't followed the details of the charges as closely as I perhaps should. Most of these types of cases, if you look at general cases, are all very frequently people who are lone wolves who self-radicalize. But in this specific case in Dearborn, I can't say. I haven't.
I don't know either, and maybe that's because I'm hungry for details about that. Put on your other hat for a second, Josh. Did the Democrats agree to open the government? Is that what you're reading in the tea leaves online?
You know, Hugh, I actually think that the results from the elections may actually slow down the potential for a resolution to the government shutdown. They think Democrats now think they won, politically speaking, given the scope of the victories in Virginia and New Jersey, especially. So, look, I thought it was the president talking to Brett Baer yesterday, and I think the comments as well said that the government shutdown was a factor in Republican losses in those elections, but that only Democrats are going to be more demanding when it comes to asking for concessions to reopen the government. They're the ones who shut it down. They're hoping to use that leverage.
False negatives are bad and false positives are bad, and I think the Democrats are reading a false positive here because absolutely nobody I know thinks the shutdown is good for the Democratic brand. It went from being a slogan, Schumer shutdown, to being a brand, and pretty soon it's going to be a tattoo. Josh Kroshauer, thank you. Follow Josh on X at Josh Kroshauer. I do want to say I have been reading in the breaks over at X a variety of different posts that suggest Democrats have reached some kind of an agreement with Republicans having to do with a so-called minibus, not an omnibus, not all the spending through the end of next September, not a continuing resolution, but a minibus, meaning 3 of the annual appropriations bills, plus a continuing resolution that is clean, that extends into January so that people can get paid again, the SNAP benefits can be paid again, and the air traffic controllers can be back out there. Now, I'm not going to be in tomorrow, I think. Alex Marlowe is scheduled to sit in for me as I head off to a Salem event down south, and then I got to get up to New Hampshire, and that all involves a lot of flying through a lot of regional airports. So I really don't know where I'm going to be over that, but I'm going to be back for the 250th birthday +1 of the Marine Corps. The 250th birthday of the Marine Corps is Monday. Veterans Day is Tuesday. We'll be live on Veterans Day, though I will be doing my annual thefund.org show, as well as bringing you updates on everything having to do with the shutdown or not the shutdown. Maybe the end of the shutdown. We'll find out. If you missed President Trump talking to Brett Baer last night, good interview. They did get to the most contentious argument among Republicans. Not about Mamdani. It's not about New Jersey or Virginia. It's about the filibuster. Here's that exchange.
A few more things. You said Republicans should get rid of the filibuster. Yeah. Based on what you said this morning, you don't really think the Democrats could never win the Senate again, right?
No, I think that if we got rid of the filibuster, we would approve so many good things, common sense things, wonderful things, that it would be hard to beat us. If we don't, it's always going to be a slog. So I do say this. I would say absolutely, without question, I have no doubt in my mind, get rid of it. And the Republicans should do it. But they have a number of Republicans that don't agree. And you know what? It's a question. Do I want to lose my relationship with those Republicans that have been very good to me for a long period of time, that voted against the crooked Democrats on impeachment and everything else? Do I want to lose them over it? I think it's a very important point. Do you ever have people that are wrong, but you can't convince them? So do you destroy your whole relationship with them or not? I'd be close to losing it, but probably not.
Good for him. He understands. He's never going to change the minds of most of the Republican senators on this. I'm never going to change my mind. I am 100% for the filibuster because it's anti-majoritarian on matters of legislation. I do like the ability to do the reconciliation bill in order to afford tax relief when necessary and spending when necessary in emergency. You can move it under the Byrd rule. There's a lot of things you can do under reconciliation, so I'm all in favor of that. But the reality is it protects us against expansion of the court. I think it might be unconstitutional anyway to expand the court, and I think Democrats would get smoked if they attempted to destroy the rule of law or bring D.C. or Puerto Rico in as states. Puerto Rico doesn't want to be a state. D.C. is constitutionally barred from being a state. But why tempt them? And if they're going to be fingerprints on breaking the glass and pulling a fire alarm by breaking the filibuster, they should be Democrat fingerprints, because it's a bad idea. Now, if he wants to go to war, verbal war, on the blue slip, I'm all with him. I hate the blue slips. The blue slips is a non-constitutional, extra-constitutional device, just like the filibuster, but it is not consonant with, it is not an extension of the anti-majoritarian theory of separation of powers and vertical and horizontal separation of powers, and with federalism. The government's not supposed to move fast, but it's supposed to move on some things, like district court judges. When the Republicans win everything, as they did in the last election, they ought to be able to make some district court appointments in every state of the union where there is a vacancy. Instead, we are looking at 4, probably 8 years without any district court appointments worth having in a state like California or on any of the coastal states. That's just nuts. Go after the blue slip, Mr. President. Go after the blue slip. Joined by the one and only Ben Domenech. He is host of the Big Ben podcast. He's editor-at-large at The Spectator. Of course, he's a Fox News contributor. And Ben, welcome. I'm going to go in reverse order of the Big Ben podcast this week, because I found your conversation with Charles Murray to be fabulous. And it reminded me of, until he died, Hitch was about a weekly guest on the Hugh Hewitt show, and sometimes we did 3-hour shows after he did God Is Not Great. Did a 3-hour show with Dr. Mark Roberts, a very accomplished theologian. Great interview, 3-hour program. Did a 2-hour program with David Allen White from the Catholic perspective. I love talking about that stuff because I think it's pretty easy. Apologetics is pretty easy to do. Were you surprised by Charles Murray's decision to write a book about it at, 80, 81?
I have to be quite. I did not have this on my bingo card here.
Huh.
I mean, I did not expect that. One thing I will say is that, I've interviewed Charles a lot. I think I'm trying to remember. I probably interviewed him for the first time probably around 2010, and he's obviously someone who has been, a titan of kind of the intellectual right, a not uncontroversial one. Obviously, but also someone who I always found to be, when I talked to him, extremely unlike the caricature that is painted of him by many of his opponents on the left. And so, to a certain extent, I'm not surprised that he would be able to approach a topic of such significance with depth and nuance, because I know that he's certainly capable of that, and that anybody who's painted him in a false light over the years would be, shocked to learn that that's the kind of thing that he can do. At the same time, I think that he's also someone who had to be kind of, as we detailed in the interview, prompted to do it because he didn't think anybody would be all that interested. And that's, there's an element of him, having known him a little bit over the years, that always sticks out to me as being perhaps because of his experience with the bell curve and everything like that, hesitant to kind of go out there with things. And one of the most critical elements of this to me was his observations about his own personal animus toward people who had deeply felt religious belief, because he thought that was something that smart people did not believe. And I think that him admitting that is significant, because I think it's something that, quite frankly, a lot of people in his class, in the think tank class, the thinker class on the right, actually do think and hold to, and it's a sad state of affairs, because I wish that they would reconsider that. And even if it is simply to take another look at this, understand the significance it holds for so many people, and think about it in the same way that Charles has, analytically, logically, look at it and say, what am I missing? And be open to the idea that you are missing something.
The book is called Taking Religion Seriously. And to get an introduction to it, listen to the latest edition of the Big Ben podcast, because it is very self-explanatory. He got there via the argument of design. And that has always been to me the most obvious reason that one has to believe that the created order is not accidental. It's too complex. It's too amazing. And Hitch and I would argue about that for a long time. Every time we talk about it, I used to moderate debates for him at Biola and other places, because the argument from
you went into Biola with Hitch. I got to look that up. Is that on YouTube?
I'm sure it is, but I was the moderator. I was not his opponent. His opponent was William Lane Craig, and I got to say, debating Hitch is not a fair proposition.
It's a monumental. I mean, he can make quick work of you. And the other thing about Hitch, and then people who are debaters will know this, is that you can understand that Hitch is somebody who could debate both sides of a question, which is the most dangerous person to take on in any circumstance like that. I would argue that if Hitch had wanted to write a book in favor of the existence of God and the divinity of Jesus Christ, it probably would have been an incredibly powerful book.
Yeah, the first vanity website I ever did, I did a vanity website years ago called Hugh and Hitch, or Hitch and Hugh, or something like that. Because I interviewed him more than 70 times, usually for as long as I talked to you, and sometimes much longer. Hitch is an amazing intellect, but Dawkins did not have the winsomeness of Hitchens when it came to debating. Dawkins, in fact, Adam should go find that cut if you could, Adam. Go ahead, Ben.
The one thing I was going to say about Dawkins is I believe Richard Dunn. Go ahead.
Play that clip for us, can you?
Okay, do you believe Jesus turned water into wine?
Yes.
You seriously do?
Yes.
You actually think that Jesus got water and made all those molecules turn into wine?
Yes.
My God.
Yes.
Okay.
My God, actually, not yours.
And so that's how it went.
Look, I just think that this is it's very worth, I think, paying attention to, that someone of Charles Murray's intellect, who basically, had gone away from this for logical reasons before, and then came back to it for logical reasons in his older age, and not out of some, a desperate attitude toward death or anything like that. And he makes that very clear in his book. He questions himself and the hubris that he has as a younger man, and I think that that's something that is it's worthwhile, and especially in this political era when it's loath to admit such things. I think it's worth people's time to pay attention to it.
I also think people ought to study apologetics, because the argument from design is ancient. I mean, it really is prime mover. It goes way back, and I'm surprised it took a smart guy like Murray that long. I love the idea of the Pariah Club, the Pariah Chess Club, though. Can you imagine what the conversation was at the Pariah Chess Club, which included Charles Krauthammer and Charles Murray?
Well, the thing is, so Daniel, Charles was someone who was a green room colleague and an acquaintance, but his son Daniel is an actual friend. I actually have to follow up with him about that, because I want to hear about if he ever got to listen in on the Pariah Chess Club, because that is something that I would definitely like to know about.
Daniel wrote or helped compile the second book of Charles's essays, and he came on to help promote it when it came out. He's a fabulous guy. I think he's a filmmaker, isn't he?
Yeah, yes, and he also is one of these people who dabbles in everything and is somehow incredibly good at all of it.
Oh, I hate those people.
It's one of those frustrating types.
Yeah, very good.
But he's exceptional. I actually think if he put his mind to it, he would be a regular in replacement of you and me on Special Report. But that's something that he has chosen not to do with his life.
Well, let me ask you about the fact that Charles Murray and you were talking about Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell's in his 90s. Charles is in his 80s. I'm going to be 70 before many more years go by. And, we're going to roll off the table. We're going to go. Charles doesn't stop. He's an inspiration to me. And Thomas never stopped. He's an inspiration to me. So I won't stop, but I'm not going to work that hard. And God, hope I get a lot of years to play with my grandkids. But you never know. You're 70. Do you think the public intellectual arena is doing a good job of teeing up the next generation?
I wish it was doing a better job. Unfortunately, I don't think that it's really nailing it. And I think a big part of that is the distraction currently of different and various methods of media. That being said, I actually have a piece in the latest edition of The Spectator that goes into the fact that Thomas Sowell is, despite what you might expect, as old as he is, as long as he has been around, an incredible force when it comes to being an internet influencer. He is all over the place. His memes, the quotes, the people reacting to videos of him talking to Peter Robinson and others, and Coleman Hughes, who's a brilliant young guy, had a great observation when we were out. Charles and I were at the Hoover Institution together for something appreciating Thomas, and he had the observation that despite all of his long-winded books and things that are, sort of doorstops in terms of their size, that Thomas always had a gift for the straightforward comment, the pithy observation that cuts through the BS that is foisted upon people by those who are trying to use big words to bamboozle you. And that's something that I think is very powerful. It's Orwellian in a sense, something that cuts through. And I think that in this internet age, that's something that people have a lot of desire for.
Yeah, I am never going to forget Charles Murray telling Ben Domenech that Thomas Sowell would not allow him to write an essay that referred to his being burdened by growing up in Harlem in the 40s by the slights and the discrimination of that era, because Thomas Sowell said there weren't any. Now, I don't know that that's the common experience. He might have been too smart to notice, but Charles Murray telling that story is absolutely gold.
You would think that would be just something that he could just write and it would be fine. But no. That's I think, what makes Thomas so special.
Don't go anywhere. I'm going to talk with...
just an American treasure.
I'm going to talk with Ben during the break. On the other side, we're going to talk about Comrade Mamdani. During the break, we're going to talk about Jay Jones, our new Attorney General, Ben and my new Attorney General, and what that means for American politics. A quick 3-minute reaction on Jay Jones being elected after his text wishing death upon his colleagues and suffering upon his colleagues' children. I didn't think it was possible. Say it ain't so. Joe, Ben, what do you think?
Well, look, I think that this is a very sad thing to declare, Hugh, but I actually think that Jay Jones's comments probably helped him more than they hurt him.
Whoa.
That's the really scary thought. Because if you look at the simple data here, there are more people who voted for Jay Jones after he had those comments exposed than before. And that's not just in the early voting. It's, of course, including the election day. So it's a little bit skewed. But the point is simply this. You would expect to see a race get closer, and it didn't. And that, to me, is an indictment of everything that we have going on in America, but also an indication of what works with the Democratic base. When they go in to those voting booths where no one is looking, they are unashamed of voting for Jay Jones. And that's something that, I do not like to condemn my neighbors without confronting them directly or anything like that. But it's one of these things that I think we just have to accept about the current state of affairs, that the attitude that Charlie Kirk deserved what he got, that you would like to see more Republicans suffer, that you would like to see their families suffer, their children suffer, that is not a negative within today's Democratic Party. They, I think, on some level know that. It's why you saw the Washington Post come out the day before the election and say that this was a contest between partisanship and human decency. Well, Virginia failed that test, and Virginia, of all states, having, and being someone who's lived in it for the vast, overwhelming majority of my life, I can say they have a bit of a civility fetish. They like the fact that people can get along across these different lines. That's why people were so horrified when things like the blackface controversy happened with Ralph Northam and with his attorney general as well, by the way. And that's something that, in the past would have given people pause. Now they feel licensed to embrace this type of extremism, and we should take them at their word that this is the kind of thing that they support. They've proven it.
Let me get a completely wild speculation here. Jared Golden, Democrat of Maine, has announced he's not running for re-election. And the reason he cited were threats against his family. He doesn't want to spend another Thanksgiving in a hotel because he's a very brave man. He's a Marine. Just guess. Do you think those threats came from the left or from the right? We got 30 seconds, Ben.
I would almost, I mean, in the absence of knowledge, I would put a very heavy bet, and I would take points on it that it came from the left and not the
Me
right.
too. Because he is identified with the anti-trans in athletes.
Yes,
and
I think that any pro-Israel Democrat should expect to experience that as well in the coming cycle.
Wow, we are in a bad place. Ben, time to talk about Comrade Mamdani. I enjoyed your conversation with Caroline Downey today, although I must say, when she said housing is definitely unattainable for her generation, she's Gen Z, I don't believe that. I had a 13.5% mortgage when the fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I bought our first house in 1985. It's not unattainable. You just can't live in New York City.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. I think that if I had to, parse that a little bit, I think she was referring mostly to the New York City situation. But I agree with you. And I also think, by the way, that there's a lot of things that have to do with this that are simply about attitudes towards saving and managing money that the youth no longer have, meaning that you have certain things that you assume you have to pay for in order to have a conceivable life. And I know that I whined about this in the last segment of the show, but the simple fact that we have the kind of outpouring of expenditures toward content is something that, in the past was, I grew up in a family that had rabbit ears. We didn't have cable until after I went to college. And so the idea that these things are all completely necessary for a life, look, it's the kind of thing where I'm not asking you to be to suddenly be a trad wife when it comes to managing, baking your own bread and buying flour in gigantic, drums from Costco. It's more along the lines of saying, look, you can save toward these kinds of things, and yes, it is not ideal, but frankly, you're going to get a lot more out of it than you will out of that college education. Depending on where you go. And you also are going to be, I think, in a position where if you make the right choices along those lines, you can afford it. This is the problem, though, because that's all of that I just said to you. That's oatmeal. That is serving people the kind of gruel that they do not want to hear in this day and age. And look, it's the reality, but it's also something that Republicans haven't figured out a way to really message in response to. At the same time, I just have to say this. It is a stunning factor of the shallow nature of young women in New York City that they would go for Mamdani by the numbers that they did, simply because he's a cute guy who looks good when he smiles. And I'm sorry, that is just a fact. That's a reality. The human nature is what it is, and dressing up socialism in the form of a young, good-looking guy who does not have the various ephemera of food that seems to always be attached to Bernie Sanders' blazers is a significant upgrade for socialism.
Now, I got to say, I had because of miscommunication, I had to share a ride with a fellow stranded person who happened to be a professor of law at Yale, lives in the city, and he drives up to New Haven a couple of times a week to teach. And so we were riding along. I said, look, Comrade Mamdani wants rent control for everything in the city. Can that be done? And he said, he's a property professor, by the way, at Yale. Said, yes, it will take him a year. Do you know what that's going to do, Ben, to New York? That will destroy housing stock. Do people not understand basic economics anymore?
No, I don't think that they do. And I think that that's, basic economics by Thomas Sowell, by the way, is not something that is assigned in almost any of the graduate courses that any of these people went through. But it's also something that I think is indicative of just people not understanding that socialism, as much as it sounds good, has never delivered on these promises. It cannot deliver on these promises, and it will not deliver on these promises. And that's why I think ultimately Mamdani is going to spawn imitators, but they will be stylistic imitators as opposed to people who promise the kind of ridiculous, unicorns for everyone things that he has promised, because they're ultimately going to be unachievable. At the same time, you're going to see, I think, an incredible level of spin from, MS, from CNN to the degree that they can, from the Condé Nast folks who've already been plastering him all over their covers. They are going to spin this as much as they can until it becomes undeniable that he is failing, and then we'll see how they deal with it. One thing that I do think is hilarious, though, is I think that AOC should be thanking her lucky stars that Zohran Mamdani is not eligible to run for president.
You bet.
Because the simple fact is that by 2028, he might be more popular than her, at least in the mindset of Gen Z, if they can spin him the way that they would like to.
Now, Ben, I'm hoping out loud and in print that the Republican National Committee Digital Division has already set up a war room to follow the Mamdani record, his promises, his delivery, where are the grocery stores, where are the free buses, where's the rent control. Do you think they know he's their face that they've got to focus on and follow the Alinsky, the rules for radicals for Alinsky, objectify and ridicule? It's going to be ridiculous what he does. Do you think the RNC is ready for that?
I don't think they are. I think that they've been deluding themselves a little bit about the nature of this threat for a while, and it's unfortunate because I think it's been pretty clear. And look, we haven't talked about it, and there's too little time left to talk about it in this segment, but the simple fact is this is a horseshoe theory situation, if I've ever seen one. To see the kind of, Hugh, I don't know if you've seen the list of demands that the DSA had leaked about what they want from this Mamdani regime.
No, I have not.
Every single one, you can find it on X. All of them have to do with Israel. All of them have to do with, breaking the city from Israel in every single respect, restoring any of the people who had gotten, removed from various city universities and the like back to their jobs, giving people passes and if they had any criminal liability when it came to their protests in the past. And it's just an indication that at a certain level, this really is about an anti-Israel movement on the left. That, look, the right has a podcaster problem. The left has a mayor of New York City problem.
He got 300,000 people working for him, and no one's going to wear their Star of David to work anymore, I think. Ben, very quick, we got 2 minutes. People say horseshoe theory all the time. I know what it means, you know what it means, but we have Steelers fans listening. Would you define what it is?
Steelers fans who I hope are pretty happy after taking things away from the Indianapolis Colts. So look, horseshoe theory is best understood as this. At the far ends of both spectrums of the right and left, there is overlap. And that overlap is driven by anti-elite sentiment, by, a shared, a sort of anti-capitalist, sometimes they would say globalist attitude toward various things. But it also shares, increasingly in recent years, a shared faith in anti-Semitism and an obsession with the Jewish question or something along those lines. They might not frame it that way. Not everybody is blatant as some of these podcasters are in terms of their admiration for Adolf Hitler and things like that. But here's the thing. There are people who have been incredibly accused of saying things that are anti-Semitic along the lines over the years, perhaps unfairly. But there are people who just openly embrace it, and those are not people who you should waste any time on. From my perspective, they are not part of your coalition. All of these folks who are in this current, conflagration on the right openly campaigned against Donald Trump in 2024. They are not part of your coalition. You do not need to reach out to them. You do not need to include them in anything, and you should not give them the time of day.
Amen, amen. Again, I say amen. And shunning is the best strategy. Ben Domenech, follow him on X at B Domenech. Go get the latest Big Ben pod. You got to listen to that Charles Murray interview. It's fascinating. Talk to you next week, Ben. Thank you. I was just reading in Politico, which is a tip sheet for Democrats. All right. I'm a partisan broadcaster. It's okay to be partisan. Politico is partisan. And Politico is just a tip sheet for Democrats. So I want to know what Democrats are thinking or what they want people to think. I read Politico. So here, sure enough, at 5 a.m. this morning, the leader of a Democratic donor network fielded excited calls Tuesday night from donors looking to help expand the party's chances of winning seats in Texas and Florida. Progressive candidate recruitment group Run for Something saw spikes in signups in the last 24 hours. And Senate Democrats are eyeing Ohio, Iowa, and Alaska, states Trump won by double digits as battlegrounds. All right. Alaska does have a great senator, Dan Sullivan, but they have this very bizarre ranked choice voting system that I don't understand. So I'm going to have Dan Sullivan on a lot between now and then, and we got to tell everyone in Alaska to vote for Dan Sullivan. John Cornyn will win handily in Texas. This article, in fact, acknowledges that John Cornyn would win handily, that Democrats are hoping that Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton wins a divisive primary against John Cornyn, into which Wes Hunt has also stepped, I believe, and that somehow John Cornyn isn't renominated, because you can't beat John Cornyn. This is one of the reasons I like John Cornyn a lot. I think it's great to have someone who is a former Texas Supreme Court justice and a longtime respected member of the Senate with a lot of seniority working on behalf of the Lone Star State. I expect President Trump to endorse him, Senator Cruz to endorse him. I expect all Republicans in Texas to figure out, hey, we don't want to have to defend a seat that doesn't require any defense, and we might actually lose. So Democrats are laying out a script, and they're trying to telegraph through the media that Democrats should register as Republicans and vote in the Republican primary in order to elect anybody other than John Cornyn who can't be beat in Texas. So I want Republicans to know, vote for John Cornyn. But I'm also here to tell you, Ohio is not going to vote for Sherrod Brown. He's obliged to find a job for the first time in his life. He went right from Yale to the Ohio State House, to the Congress, the House of Representatives, then to the Senate. 50 years in government. Ohio is not bringing him back. He wants to come back. He's going to try that. Lots of Ohio candidates over the years have lost and then tried to come back and had the door slammed in their face. Because Ohio voters have moved on, and Ohio is a ruby red state. Iowa is also a ruby red state. Joni Ernst has stepped down. Ashley Hinson is going to win. So what is this puff talk about? They're not going to win the Senate back. I mean, not impossible. Florida's impossible. The idea that they're going to get someone in Florida to beat Ashley Moody is about as silly as I've ever heard. But we'll have on Senator Moody. I first interviewed her when she was Attorney General Moody. She's very smart. She's very well liked. She's won statewide in Florida. What are they doing? Well, when you hear about a Democratic progressive group, what they are doing is raising money for themselves. They want you to contribute to their PAC so that they can recruit their candidates so that they can take their cut. Now, I'm going to leave it to the ruthless fellas. Leave it to Josh Holmes and Comfortably Smug and Michael Duncan and John Ashbrook to explain this in detail for you. I'm asking them, I'm putting out the ruthless bat signal. Please explain why consultants want candidates to run impossible races. They want to begin a narrative that it's possible because consultants want to make money from small dollar donors who are, frankly, dumber than Steelers fans. And small dollar donors, for example, Graham Plantner in Maine will never beat Susan Collins. Janet Mills in Maine will never beat Susan Collins. All right? And none of that. John Cornyn is not beatable. And Ashley Moody is not beatable. But they ran an absolute kamikaze candidate against Lindsey Graham. I think they spent $20 million 6 years ago against Lindsey Graham and got 42% of the vote. There's some people who cannot be beat. John Cornyn, Lindsey Graham, Ashley Moody. They just can't be beat. Ohio, Iowa, they're not going to flip to a blue candidate. I don't care if it's an off year. The economy's going to be better, and it's already getting better. And the false positive of Tuesday night, they're trying to get your money. Don't fall for it. Politico is a tip sheet for what the Democrats want you to believe. It's not reality. It's a funhouse mirror. And that is my public service announcement for you today. Come right back. Senator Jim Talent joins me next. We're going to talk about the filibuster and what I just told you about Democrats and consultants. Former Missouri Senator Jim Talent joins me. He's a senior fellow at the Reagan Institute Center for Peace Through Strength. Senator Talent, welcome back. I just got done trying to explain why the Democrats want the country, or at least the Beltway, to believe that there are winnable races in Ohio and Iowa and Texas. Now, I suppose it's possible in Texas if John Cornyn isn't nominated. But, I mean, it's not possible to beat John Huston in Ohio. Bernie Moreno vanquished Sherrod Brown when Sherrod Brown was an incumbent. And Iowa is about as red as Missouri. Am I right this is consultants looking to expand their war chest?
You've cracked the code. They're in the business of running campaigns. And sometimes they will generate campaigns in order to raise money and make money. And I think that is largely what is going on here. I doubt seriously they have numbers indicating they can win in Ohio or Iowa, or certainly not Florida, but they would like to have the campaigns. I mean, it's their business, Hugh, and they do it with ballot issues too, all the time. And ballot issues are particularly good because you don't have a candidate to manage then. So
now they
I
look
think
up
that's
at
probably
Maine.
a lot of it.
They look up at Maine and they see that Donald Trump only wins 1 out of their 4 districts, or 1 out of their 4 electoral votes. I can't remember how they do it. That's it. One per CD and 2 for the state. So Trump got 1 from the northern CD up there, and they think, oh, we can take out Susan Collins. You served with Susan Collins. They will never beat Susan Collins. They tried, I think, $200 million. $200 million to try and beat her.
Well, I don't want to jinx Susan, and I don't want to cut off her fundraising, but I definitely tend to agree with you. I mean, look, anything can happen. We can't be certain. We've talked about the fact that if the economy is off or sluggish, and I think it is getting better, I think the reductions in energy prices are very hopeful. On the other hand, we're flying against the headwind of AI, which is going to be costing us jobs in the short term. So I don't want to get into an economic analysis, but I do not expect any of those states to be lost to the Republican Party. And there is no question. Look, I could tell you stories, stories. I've seen it with ballot issues in particular. I mean, they'll go out and they'll convince. The one thing I disagree with you about is, yes, they raise some money from small donors, but what they really like are the extremely wealthy people that they can approach and sell a bill of goods and raise, get millions of dollars in contributions from them because they think they're changing the direction of the country.
Do you think anyone really, this is why I like the Ruthless podcast so much, Jim Talent, is because they actually explore the underbelly. They're pros. I don't know how much money media buyers make, but it's a vast amount of money, and it's hidden.
Oh, yeah.
No one really knows how that.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
Placing
now
those
let's talk about the.
I mean, that's the big profit center for him, is placing those ads.
And now I want to go to the filibuster. I'm pretty opposed to changing the filibuster. Jim Langford came on here yesterday and said, no, not now, not ever, ever, never. I think Majority Leader Thune's in my camp and the Langford camp. But you kind of want to probe around, and so I want to give you a chance to sell that poison. It's poison, Jim. Poison.
Yeah, it really isn't. It's a narrow exception. I mean, I wrote about it with my former chief of staff, Mark Strand. Your producer has written about it. It would be an exception to the it would be an exception to the rule that would permit the Senate by a simple majority to pass a clean CR that did not raise or lower levels of spending and contain no policy, no riders or anything like that. And the argument for it, is the argument from necessity. In other words, sure, the filibuster means the Senate can shut down the Senate. It shouldn't mean that the Senate can shut down the executive and judicial branches. And it was exactly on the basis of that argument that the filibuster was constrained in cases of the confirmation calendar for executive or judicial confirmations, because otherwise we couldn't have staffed the judicial and executive branch. So I really see it very consistent with Senate precedent. I think it would, if we did it, then we'd never have to deal with this kind of a thing again, at least from a Senate minority. This is the first time in my memory that a Senate minority has shut down the government. In the past, it was always a majority of the House or the Senate or both against the president. So, yeah, I would do it if I was them, but I don't blame Thune for. I mean, he doesn't have the votes to do that, and if you don't have the votes, you know, there's no point in trying it. So, yeah, I'd like to
And
see it.
the
And we could
president
get
was
this-
pretty. The president was pretty blunt with Brett Baer last night. He said, "I don't want to make any enemies. These guys have been good to me. These gals have been nice to me. I'm not going to go to the wall for this. It's not going to happen." And I think his messaging muddled the picture on Tuesday night, because I think Tuesday night was a false positive for Democrats. The tides of American electoral history are pretty fixed. And if you're in the White House and you have both the House and the Senate, you're not going to do good in the off year, which isn't the midterm. Isn't that true?
And that explains most of it, you. So 2 points, and I did some local interviews today and pointed this out, okay? So if one voter out of 50 in New Jersey and Virginia had voted Republican who voted Democrat, we still lose those states, but it's so close, it's close enough that everybody goes, well, this is what we expected. And remember, those people in the middle, the soft voters, they're going in there, they're looking at the ballot, and they're sighing to themselves and they're saying, well, I guess talent's less bad than the other guy. I'm going to vote for him. So I don't see this as anything other than the base Democrats energized. And the one thing I will say, that maybe I can contribute, we need to start talking more about the economy and what the president is doing for it. In other words, the president moves so quickly that it's hard to have message discipline and focus on the issues that the voters say they care about, which is crime and is immigration, but is also the economy. So I'd like to see us just talking more about what the tax bill is going to do, talking more about lowering the price of energy, talking more about rebuilding the manufacturing base and creating good jobs. And I expect they'll get there. That's a pretty obvious conclusion to draw.
And he started today in the Oval when he talked about the cost of Thanksgiving dinner, the neutral metric every year, down 25% in 1 year. That's remarkable.
Yes, and the price of food usually tracks the price of energy. There's a lag time, but it tracks it. So I expect the price of food to start stabilizing or going down.
Jim Talent, always good to talk to you. I will talk to you after the Veterans Day next, so enjoy the Veterans Day. Follow Jim on X at Jim Talent. Pursuant to what Jim Talent was just saying, Republicans should talk about the economy because it is getting better, really kind of fast. And in fact, President Trump did just that in the Oval Office today, talking about the Walmart metric for what a full Thanksgiving spread costs year over year. Cut number 5.
They just came out with a very powerful statement. They've done it for many years, that under the Biden administration, a Thanksgiving meal with all the trimmings cost 25% more. In other words, our Thanksgiving this year coming up will cost 25% less than sleepy Joe Biden's. Now, to me, that's better than anything there is. That's better than a poll. They've got everything included, from the trimmings and from the turkey and from everything, a lot of different items. It's 25% less this year than it was last year when he was so-called in charge. He wasn't in charge. The people around the desk were in charge. The auto pen was in charge. That is a big factor.
And Jim Talent just explained why. Energy prices are coming down because we're back to producing energy in America again. And it's going to continue. Inflation is under control. It's at 3%. It's going to fall next year. There is a job question. Will AI have already eaten into the job base by then? But I don't know if that's going to actually impact the midterms. I feel pretty good about the midterms. So does Speaker Johnson. Going to join Sean Hannity tonight. So be sure to tune in as we talk about Speaker Pelosi's decision to throw it in. Former Speaker Pelosi. I will never, ever, ever say that she was good for America after that stunt at the State of the Union. But we'll talk about it tonight. Let me remind you, I'm in the Relief Factor studio, and I'm taking it with me on the road. And I've got enough to get me through 4 days of travel and 4 different airplane flights, if they happen, and I don't end up in the middle of Knucklesville, nowhere, because of the Democrats. There isn't going to be funding. I was just reading the small print. Majority Leader Thune's going to offer up a very reasonable bill, and Democrats are going to make people suffer more through the long weekend, and they're going to make people go hungry, and they're going to make you miss your flight. So I'm taking my extra relief factor because that means a lot of airport time and the potential for actually being in airports overnight. That happened to me twice in 2024 when Democrats were running things. Now they're running things into the ground. So I'll take my relief factor with me. You should get started with it right now. Call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. 1-800-4-RELIEF. It's the dreaded overhead bin plus the back out of whack. It's a double whammy. But no matter what ails you, your neck, your back, your knees, whatever it is, your shoulders, Relief Factor will help you. It's Icarian and curcumin and Veritron Omega, 4 pills in 1 pack. The starter pack is $19.95, less than $1 a day. And when you try it, you will love it. $19.95 for a 3-week trial. Give it a shot. 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief, or go to their website, relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Alex Marlowe in for me tomorrow. So thank you, Adam. Thank you, Harley. Thank you, General Isimo. I'll see you on Tuesday on Veterans Day. Alex will also be on Monday, the 250th birthday of the United States Marine Corps. Stay tuned to this great station.